should be the longest driver you can buy. What's happening, Panda Nation? Peter Von Panda here. I just bought this. It's another crank driver. Actually, if you have checked out my videos before, you know that I actually bought a crank driver a while ago. Krank is a golf club company, and they are really known for their long drive drivers. But what they do is they make, obviously, consumer heads here, and I never really thought about them for that until I discovered their Formula 11 High-COR driver. What I've learned here is that the face of the driver has to be within a certain spec, and core, coefficient of restitution, is how they measure that, and it really means that the face can't be overly springy. Obviously, launch that ball out into the stratosphere. So they all have to be within the same limits. Now, a high-core driver is not legal for regulation golf play because it's too springy. Bring, bring. And I wanted to try out the high-core driver to see if it would actually give me some more distance, and I think, if you watch a video, I proved that it's theoretically possible because I was getting the same distance with slower swing speeds out of the High-COR, which is the Formula 11 X driver, and so I was really interested in that. Now, that driver is kind of meant for my swing speeds. I really swing about 92, 93 miles an hour, and that High-COR driver is really meant for 80 to about 100 miles an hour. This is a super high core driver, denoted here by the XX, so super high core, and that's because the face of this driver is super thin, means it should flex. I can actually feel it flexing as I'm pushing my thumb into it. I'm just kidding, you can't. And in fact, there's nothing about this driver that would make me assume that it's any different other than that overlapping double X there, and so if you were going to sneak this in your bag to play in a round of golf with your buddies, I don't think anyone would notice here. But what I was really interested in, does that super high core really work? Can I just launch some bombs with a super high core driver? Now, when I got this, I took off a sticker right here that said, only meant for swing speeds up to 80 miles an hour, because it's so thin. If you hit this driver at over 80 miles an hour, probably not on the first hit, but after repeated hits, you can break this face. It's brittle. And so, because I swing at 92, 93 miles an hour, that's higher than 80 miles an hour. So there's a chance that I might get some really awesome distances, but I also might break this driver. And I was willing to take that risk. That's why I bought this sucker. Full retail price. Krank didn't send it to me. They don't care about me. All titanium construction all the way around. Now, one thing you have here are these little 5-gram weights in the back. I've never seen a separate weight kit sold for Krank. It also comes with its own adapter sleeve here, which is really awesome because I think you can dial in face angle, lie angle, and loft adjustment here. So it's actually really cool. Now, the cool thing about this is that it is fully compatible, as far as I know, with Callaway sleeve adapters. Now, I have my Callaway driver right here. This is an Epic Max Low Spin. It's a very good driver, and for all intents and purposes, I think that these two drivers are about the same. They certainly seem like they are about the same total volume. I think they are both about 200 grams. They are both in their stock configuration. What this will allow me to do is take off the Callaway driver head and put on the Krank driver head and continue testing them back to back. So what I want to do here now is go ahead and take these out to the range with my launch monitor and just see if we can get some more distance out of the Krank than with the Callaway. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do here is baseline on my Callaway Epic Max LS here. Alright, now what I'm going to do here is take this Krank driver head, the super high core, and go ahead and swap it onto the exact same shaft and hit a bunch with this. Alright, got back from hitting this Krank driver and wow! I am stunned. First of all, I'm not going to bury the lead here. This thing works. So as I was testing this against my Callaway, when I picked this up, put this on, and hit my first ball with it, that ball just soared off the face. And I actually was stunned that it went that far, and it felt pretty effortless. So I was pretty confident at that point that this thing was going to work, and so then I hit another almost 30 balls with this driver to test it out and get some decent average data for me. I will also say that I hit 30 balls and the thing hasn't broken. I will tell you what, I'm going to be hitting this more, and maybe I'll have to order a backup one because invariably this will break based on my swing speeds, but maybe not. Maybe it's just so strong it'll never break. I'm super impressed with it now, but it does kind of worry me if this thing is going to break. And I was averaging both with my Epic and with this crank driver 90 miles an hour, which is actually pretty typical for me. But I will say here that the big thing, and really the only thing that I was looking at, was ball speed coming off the face, because I wasn't going to tune this. I didn't want to get into getting the right launch and rollouts and all of that. I just wanted to see if we were getting faster ball speeds off the face, and so that was the real data that I was looking at. I had both of these adjusted to 8 degrees, and I will say that the ball speed was pretty conclusive. On the Callaway, it was coming off the face at about 120 miles an hour. Now, you might be saying, that seems pretty slow. 90 mile per hour clubhead speed, ball speed only 120. Well, yes, you're not going to get a great smash factor with the range balls, and the range balls are going to be of varying quality, but the range I'm at, the balls are of pretty low quality. But the ball speed compared to the Callaway ball speed of 120 was 130 on average coming off the crank. So that is actually pretty amazing. It's actually getting you closer to that ideal smash factor using just a standard crummy range ball. So did that translate into real distance? Well, again, I wasn't going to obsess about the distance just because I wasn't going to obsess about launch angle. I just wanted to figure out if this thin face was really springing and shooting those balls off the face. But it absolutely did. My average drive with the Callaway Epic was 198 yards. And with this Krank Super High-COR Double X, it was 217, which I could not believe. That's almost 20 yards farther with this crank driver. So this thing absolutely works. I'm actually kind of stunned. I actually hope that this face holds up even at my slightly higher than recommended swing speeds, because I really want to get out now with some friends and just crank this sucker off the tee and look at the reaction on their faces, because I was absolutely stunned. I've never seen them fly as far, and to be really honest, it was actually way more forgiving than I thought too. A lot of these were going very, very straight, so I was really stunned by this. But just more than anything, getting that extra distance. I don't play in tournament events. I'm just playing for fun, and it is just a lot of fun to outdrive some friends. It is just fun to chip from the fairway onto the green instead of leaving yourself a 150-yard iron shot to the green. So I'm just really excited about trying this out and figuring out also where the failure point is, but really just trying this out and seeing if it translates to real-world play. Now, I also will say that there is a pretty big sound difference between these two. So the Callaway Epic has a little bit more of a muted thud sound. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to demonstrate this on camera very well. The camera kind of does some sound leveling, but it's a little bit more of a satisfying thud. The crank driver has a much higher pitched, tingy, hollow sound. I think it's because there's no carbon fiber anywhere. This is all titanium, and so it's just going to have a hollower, high pitched, maybe not so pleasant sound. It's going to sound a little bit like an aluminum bat on a baseball. It's not the worst sound I've ever heard, but I would say if you practice with your drives in the practice bays at a Golf Galaxy or PGA Tour Superstore, you might get people turning and looking, because this is going to be a lot louder and a lot more harsh than a lot of drivers in those bays. So if you're going to practice outside, then it's probably not going to be a big difference, but I will say even outside, this thing was putting out a pretty good ting that people could hear from pretty far away. All right, the other thing that I will say that I actually like about this is this non-conforming face. It is built just like all the other faces. It just looks like every other face that Krank Golf puts out, which is actually to say it's pretty dark. This is what a lot of the faces from all of the big OEMs look like. So why I like this is because if you take a driver, you can send your Callaway in to someone who will shave the face. And basically what they're going to do is they're just going to shave this down. They're going to basically sand down the face to get a little thinner, to get it to a higher core level. Now what happens then is you have these really polished faces. They almost look like mirrors. They're very bright. They don't look stock, but this looks stock. So if you want to have a stealthy look, something that doesn't scream like, hey, have you modified that driver? Or hey, why is the face of that driver so shiny when I have the same driver and it's not shiny? So I think this little charcoal dark finish here is really nice because it comes out of the factory this way. So if you're trying to keep a low profile about yourself using a super high core driver, this isn't going to scream high core. In fact, the X's are overlap there. So if people are familiar with the high core, with the X here, even at a glance, I can't tell if this is the high core or the super high core, which it absolutely is. So I like the fact that even though it's non-conforming, it looks pretty stock. The other thing that's maybe a little bit of a drawback to this, it's pretty typical in most drivers, is that it's not super adjustable. I will say that it uses the Callaway sleeve, which is very adjustable. I'm not talking about that in lie and loft. What I am talking about here is that there aren't a lot of weights. There are 2 5-gram weights here in the back. I'm not even sure if they sell any other weights. You could probably hot melt this if you needed to be more fade or draw friendly here. And that's why I'm saying it's just limited adjustability, certainly no sliding weight or anything like that. Now, the other thing I will say about this is that this driver head, while it's not cheap, is actually affordable. So many driver heads now are $400 or $500 out of the gate, which is just crazy. This is a $400 driver head, but every time I've gone to Krank Golf, they've always had a coupon for like a quarter off, 25% off. So it basically makes it a $300 driver head. And if you have a shaft with a Callaway adapter on it, you don't need to buy a whole club. You can certainly buy a whole built club from them, but you can buy just the driver head, and that's going to save you some money. So at about $300, I actually think this is doing exactly what it advertises. It's a great looking driver head. I've said this is kind of the Lamborghini of driver heads. It doesn't kind of fit that organic model. It's just as very sleek and sharp edged. It actually has a profile that's a little bit more like a player's head, you know, kind of like the Sub-Zero or PXG Tour head here, so very aerodynamic. And what I also like about this is that they are a big company. They know what they're doing. You're not buying it from some small overseas fly-by-night company where they say they're high-core, but there's really no way to prove it. I really trust that Krank, built here in America, I think out of Arizona, is building exactly what they say they're building. And at least from my experience, this is absolutely performing the way I thought it might. But the Super High-COR Driver, which again, Krank is saying is not for me, absolutely proves that that thinner face works. I'm actually kind of surprised. I just didn't think that this thing would rebound or have really any effect. Even though we know it's just science, I really didn't expect to see real results that I would feel right out of the gate, right off the tee box, and also see in the data. So I'm really excited about that. And I will also say that probably the most important thing about this is that it is fun. Again, it's not the greatest sound, but it is just super satisfying to see your shots fly off the tees, man. It's kind of like when you get a really good shot under your belt and you just wish that all the shots were like that, and most of the time your shots are really mediocre. This lets you play where most of the shots feel like good shots, so that's really exciting. So if you are a golfer that just likes to go out and play, you just want to get the most out of your game, you just want to go out and have some good times with your friends, you don't play in sanctioned events, you don't play in USGA tournaments, you're not trying to get into the US Open, this is something that I think we as average amateur golfers really need. But if you want to support Krank and what they're doing for us average golfers, then you can pick up this driver head. I'll put a link to it in the description below. Peter Von Panda, out.
We can discover more and explore so much deeper. We can live better than ever thanks to Peter. Peter Von Panda. Peter Von Panda.
Let's get this. Or this way? Right this way? Huh? Does it look good?